A lot of people around the world believe the United States has democracy, right? That magical word. But this is a myth, a fairy tale, like Jack and the Beanstalk or Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. And if you haven't heard of any of those things, then you're probably living a far more rational life than most Americans. We have a giant bunny rabbit that brings us candy, eggs. You know what? Just forget I mentioned it. American democracy is a fun little propaganda trick by the ruling elite, the richest jackwads in the world. And get this, it's been that way since day one of our country. In 1787, when the U.S. Constitution was signed, only white land-owning adult men had the right to vote. That amounted to less than 10% of the population in most areas. So if 90% of the humans in a country can't partake in the so-called democracy, that's not a democracy at all. That would be like saying you manage a professional basketball team when actually it consists of 3 guys and 5 dogs, and only 1 of the guys and 0 of the dogs know how to play basketball. You don't have a basketball team. You've got a mental hospital. And the U.S. doesn't have democracy. We also are a mental hospital. But even now, in present day, when most adult Americans have the right to vote, the U.S. still does not have a democracy. Here are some of the ways you know we don't. Number 1, it's actually been scientifically proven. A large Princeton University study in 2014 went through just about every political issue you could even think of. And they found that if the American people want something to happen in the U.S. that does not align with corporate interests, then it has a 0% chance of ever happening. 0. Nothing happens in the United States that isn't first approved by the richest, most greedy, most unhinged maniacs at the top of corporate America with ice cream dripping down their chins. This means the U.S. has an oligarchy, not a democracy, not a republic, a straight-up oligarchy run by thugs and criminals, a mafia state. And sure, that study was 10 years ago, but guess what? Much like Donald Trump or Joe Biden, it's only gotten worse since then. Number 2, in the last U.S. election in 2020, $14.4 billion was spent to buy every level of the election from president all the way down. Because of that, our system only allows 2 parties to ever win, Republicans or Democrats. No other party has anywhere near the amount of money needed to ever win. It's a rigged game. It's like a homeless orphan going up against Jeff Bezos in a poker game. Number 3, the candidate who spends the most money wins the election between 80 and 90% of the time. But more importantly, the 2 parties that spend the most on the election win 100% of the time. I don't know if you know this, but that's like all of the percentages. Number 4, I've kind of been lying to you through this segment. There aren't 2 parties that rule the U.S. system because it's actually 1 party. Unfortunately, most Americans don't know they're being tricked, but it's easy to trick us because we're busy playing video games about stealing cars. The 2 parties agree on 90% of the structural issues of the country. They agree on capitalism, consumerism, environmental destruction, endless war, wage slavery, unfettered aggression, destroying the social safety net, and not actually doing a damn thing for average Americans. So if all of those things are agreed upon by the 2 parties, then Americans don't really get to choose anything. We get to vote on whether the candidate was wearing a red tie or a blue one. Wow, really feel like I got my voice heard. Number 5, most of the United States votes on completely unaccountable computer voting machines in which the source code is hidden. And look, I have no problem with technology. I think computer voting is great if we can know our votes are being counted accurately with open source code. But we here in the United States have the opposite, okay? We just see a screen when we go to vote, a computer screen that just says, you should just wander off now. little fella. Just keep moving along. Votes are supposed to be important in a democracy. These machines would be like handing $100 to a stranger and just going, will you just make sure to give that to my mother? And the stranger going, sure, I'll absolutely do that. And then you never check to see whether it worked. That's our democracy. Now, these are just 5 of the examples of how we don't have a democracy in the United States. There are many more that I don't have time to go into. Gerrymandering, ballot access, provisional ballots, rigged primaries, bought off media, and much more. But if I went through them all, we'd be here for 14 years. The ruling elite, the richest people in the world who rule the U.S. system, they have no interest in giving us a real democracy. They have no interest in stopping the flood of billions of dollars into our elections or proving that our mystery computer voting machines actually work at all, or creating a system that allows for more than 2 parties, which are actually one party. So all they can do is keep repeating the mantra, the U.S. is the best democracy in the world. I think they're getting ready to make us all have it tattooed across our chests.